Socorro. The night fell heavily upon the city when Helena entered that corner snack bar, her hands trembling and her heart racing. She could barely breathe properly. Her fear stuck to her throat like a stone. The fluorescent lights flashed over her head as she approached the counter, feeling the weight of that look on her back, that look that haunted her for days, that suffocated her, that turned every corner into a trap. Helena knew that he was there, on the outside, waiting, watching through the glass as a patient predator. She needed help. She desperately needed someone to understand the silent nightmare she was living. But how could she scream for help when her voice was trapped by the constant threat? How could she ask for help when each movement could be the last? She asked for just a cup of coffee, something simple, something that would justify her presence there for a few more minutes, a few more seconds away from that man who would turn her life into a wandering hell. Dante Moretti was sitting at the corner table, as he always did when he needed to think away from the chaos of his business. That humble snack bar was his unexpected refuge, a place where the Moretti family boss could only be another customer at dawn. His dark and attentive eyes, trained to read people and situations in milliseconds, immediately captured something wrong in that woman's posture. The way she held the cup, the way her fingers trembled when she took the pen to sign the receipt, the way her eyes constantly deviated to the glass door. Dante knew fear when he saw it. He had spent his whole life provoking and fighting that feeling, and that woman was absolutely terrified. She wrote something on the receipt, her hand shaking so much that the pen almost escaped her fingers, and then left the paper on the counter, raising her eyes quickly to the customer before turning towards the exit. That was when Dante saw, in that second of distraction from the customer who was taking the change, the big and desperate letters scribbled on the receipt's verse. Help. The word was there, screaming, urgent, a silent call for salvation that the distracted customer did not even notice. Dante felt something tighten in his chest, that familiar sensation that came when injustice presented itself to him so cruelly, so desperately. He got up from the table with the same calculated calm as always, but his muscles were tense, ready. His eyes followed Helena out of the restaurant, and it was then that he saw the man on the outside, that gloomy figure leaning against the post, pretending to look at his cell phone, but with his eyes fixed on her. The subject's body language was unmistakable for someone like Dante, who had spent decades reading threats and dangers. The man began to follow her as soon as she turned the corner, keeping a calculated, predatory distance. Dante threw some bills on his table and left the restaurant, the hunter's instinct taking control. But this time, he was not the predator. He was the protector. And before you continue listening to this story, that will move every fiber of your being. Subscribe to the channel and activate the bell so you don't miss any story of justice and redemption. Let's go together on this journey. The street was empty at that time of night, only a few yellowed lights from the posts cutting through the darkness. Helena walked too fast to seem casual, but too slow to seem like she was running away. That impossible balance of someone trying not to provoke the predator, but who also needs to distance themselves from him. Dante followed her at a distance, staying in the shadows, his silent steps like those of a ghost. He could see the man a few meters behind Helena, and at every step the subject took, the anger within Dante grew like a flame fueled by gasoline. How many times has that miserable man done this? How many other women have trembled with fear because of him? Dante accelerated the pace, his plan forming in his mind with the precision of those who had already faced 1,000 battles. He was not just going to intervene, he was going to send a message, a lesson that worm would never forget. Helena turned into a darker street, and the man behind her did the same, accelerating now, reducing the distance between them. It was when Dante made his decision. He cut the path through a narrow gap that he knew well, his steps echoing against the brick walls as he ran, his heart beating not of fear, but of pure determination. He emerged in front of Helena, emerging from the shadows like an apparition, and for a second, their eyes met. Dante saw everything in that look, the absolute terror, the tears that shone in the faint light of the posts, the despair of someone who had lost all hope. Her cheeks were wet, her lips were trembling, and there were red marks on her neck, signs that it had gone too far. She did not even realize who he was, just another man in the dark street. And Dante saw the exact moment when more fear settled in her eyes. But he did not stop, did not speak. He just went straight for her, his eyes now fixed on the true target. The man who was following Helena was so focused on her that he did not see Dante approaching. He was a man of medium height, oily hair, tattered clothes, and that smell of sick obsession that Dante could feel meters away. The man had his hands in his pockets, his shoulders bent forward, the posture of someone who used to hide in the shadows, doing his dirty work when no one was looking. But Dante was looking now, and Dante never let an injustice pass when it was right in front of him, especially when it involved someone defenseless, being hunted like an animal. He closed the distance in 3 long, silent, deadly steps. The man was raising his hand, perhaps to touch Helena's shoulder, perhaps to pull her to a dark nook, but he never completed the movement. Dante's punch hit the side of the man's face with the force of a hammer hitting steel. The sound was dry, brutal, definitive. The man had no time to react, to defend himself, to understand what was happening. He was thrown to the side, hitting the brick wall with an impact that took all the air out of his lungs. His eyes were filled with shock and pain, blood beginning to flow from his broken nose. Before he could fall, before he could even process the pain, Dante grabbed him by the collar of his shirt, lifting him from the ground with a force that seemed impossible for such a well-dressed man. Dante's eyes were 2 pieces of black ice, cold and relentless, the kind of look that had made much more dangerous men tremble with fear. He drew his face closer to the bloodied face of the man, his voice coming out low, controlled, but loaded with a threat that was more real than any scream. "Speak," Dante ordered, his voice cutting the silence of the night like a blade. "Speak now, or I'll find a much more painful way to make you speak. How long have you been following her? How long have you been terrorizing that woman?" The man tried to gag something, tried to make up an excuse, but the words died in his throat when Dante tightened his collar even more, cutting off his air. "I have no patience for lies, worm. You have 5 seconds to tell me everything, every sordid detail of what you did, or I promise you'll wish you had spoken when you had the chance." The man choked, his eyes filled with tears of pain and terror, and finally, the words began to pour out of his mouth in a desperate and pathetic flow. He told everything. How he had met Helena at work, how he had become obsessed with her, how she had made it clear that she was not interested, but he could not accept it. He told how he began to follow her, first only at work, then at home, then everywhere. He told about the messages he sent all the time, the calls in the middle of the night, how he waited outside her building. He told how he had started to threaten her, to say that he knew where she lived, where she worked, where she went. Each word that came out of his mouth made Dante even more angry. Each confession revealed a deeper level of depravity and cruelty. That man had turned Helena's life into a constant nightmare, had stolen any sense of security from her, had made her afraid of simply existing, of simply living her life, and all because his pathetic ego could not accept a no, because he thought he had rights over her time, over her fear. Dante suddenly let go of the man, dropping him on the floor like a garbage bag. The guy tried to drag himself away, but Dante put his foot on his chest, pressing him against the cold concrete. "Do you really think you can do this to someone and have no consequences?" Dante asked. His voice was full of disappointment, which was almost worse than anger. "Do you really think you can terrorize a woman, chase her day and night, take any chance of peace from her, and just walk away as if nothing had happened?" He lowered himself, facing the fallen man. You chose the wrong person to follow today, because I am not the police who will give you a warning. I am not the judge who will give you a light sentence. I am someone who ensures that men like you learn the lesson as definitively as possible. Helena had stopped a few meters back, her hands covering her mouth, her eyes wide open, watching the whole scene. She did not know who that man in the dark suit was, who had emerged out of nowhere like an avenging angel, but she knew that he had just saved her. Tears continued to flow down her face, but now they were different. No longer tears of pure terror, but a confused mixture of relief, shock, and crushing gratitude. Dante looked at her quickly, his eyes softening for just a second, before returning to the man on the floor. "Are you coming with me now?" Dante said, pulling the man up with a single movement. "And you will learn what happens to men who think they can do whatever they want, without consequences." Dante called a number on his cell phone, a single word said in a low voice, and in minutes, a luxurious black car stopped next to them. Two men came out, big men with serious expressions, the kind of people you don't want to see in a dark alley. They grabbed Helena's pursuer without asking questions, throwing him into the back seat of the car as if he were uncomfortable baggage. The man tried to protest, tried to scream, but a look from Dante's security was enough to silence him completely. Dante turned to Helena, who was still standing in the same place, shaking, not knowing whether to run or thank him or simply faint with relief. He walked up to her slowly, his hands open, showing that he was not a threat, that she had nothing to fear from him. When he got close enough, he spoke with a surprisingly gentle voice, coming from someone who, seconds ago, had been pure controlled violence. "Are you safe now?" Dante said, and the words were a promise, not a hope. He is going to a place where he will learn to never do this to anyone again. He will not look for you. He will not call you. He will not even think of you without being afraid of what will happen if he tries anything. Helena sighed, her legs almost giving in, and Dante held her by the elbow, firm but gentle. "How did you know?" she managed to ask through tears, her voice broken and hoarse. "I received it," Dante simply explained. "I saw your call for help, and I never ignore a call for help, especially from someone who is being hunted by a coward who hides in the shadows." He seemed to evaluate her for a moment, seeing the marks on her neck, the constant tremor, the eyes swollen from so much crying. "How long has this been going on?" Helena swallowed hard, trying to find her voice. 3 months, she whispered, and it was as if admitting it out loud made everything too real, too painful. 3 months of a constant nightmare. He does not accept that I want nothing to do with him. It started at work. I was too kind. I smiled too much, and he interpreted it as interest. When I said I was not interested, he became obsessed. He began to follow me, to appear everywhere I went. I changed my route to work 7 times. I changed gyms 3 times. I even changed supermarkets. But he always found me. He was always there waiting, watching with that look that made my skin crawl. She wiped her tears with the back of her hand, but they kept falling. I went to the police twice, but they said they couldn't do anything until he did something concrete, as if chasing me every day, sending me threatening messages, and taking away my peace was not concrete enough. Dante felt the anger return, but hot this time. The system had failed her, as it failed so many others. The authorities hid behind bureaucracy, while people like Helena suffered, lived in constant terror, and lost pieces of themselves every day that went by without help. "This ends today," he said with absolute conviction. "You have my word. That man is going to my property, and there he will have a lot of time to think about his choices. He will have a lot of time to understand the gravity of what he did. I will not hurt him irreversibly," Dante added, seeing the gleam of concern in Helena's eyes. "But he will leave there a different person, Someone who will be afraid just to think about doing this to another person. The black car was still waiting, the engine humming low. Dante gave a signal to his men, and they understood immediately, driving off with the pursuer toward the Moretti mansion on the outskirts of the city. Helena watched the car disappear into the darkness, and it was as if part of the weight she had been carrying for months also disappeared with it. But trauma does not vanish so easily, and she was still shaking, still looking around as if she were waiting for him to appear again. Dante understood this. He had seen enough in life to know that psychological scars take much longer to heal than physical ones. "Let me take you home," he offered, already taking the keys to his own car from an inner pocket of his suit jacket. "It is not safe for you to walk alone now, not in the emotional state you are in." Helena hesitated for a moment, her instinct telling her not to trust strangers, especially strangers who were capable of such efficient violence. But then she looked into his eyes and saw something that made her relax a little, something genuine, something protective. "You do not need to be afraid of me," Dante said, as if reading her thoughts. "I know that I have just used force against that man, and I know how it must seem. But I have a sister, Helena. I have a daughter, and if any of them were in your situation, I would want someone like me to appear to protect them. So it is not charity, it is not mercy, it is justice, pure and simple." He opened the passenger door of his black Mercedes, waiting. Helena took a deep breath and entered, finally allowing her muscles to relax for the first time in months. The journey was quiet at first, only the soft sound of the engine and the night traffic. Helena was processing everything, trying to understand how her night had changed so drastically, how she had gone from a defenseless victim to someone protected by a man who clearly was not ordinary. "You are," she started, but did not know how to finish the sentence. Dante smiled lightly, keeping his eyes on the road. "I am someone who solves problems," he said diplomatically. "Let's say I have resources that most people do not have, and I like to use these resources to ensure that certain injustices are corrected." It was not a lie, but it was not the whole truth either. Helena did not need to know now that the man who saved her was Dante Moretti, head of one of the most powerful families in the region, someone whose name made politicians and businessmen tremble. She just needed to know that she was safe. "Thank you," Helena said suddenly, her voice broken by emotion. "Thank you for seeing my receipt. Thank you for not ignoring it. Thank you for—" She could not finish, the tears returning with full force. "I was so desperate. I did not know what to do anymore." Today he was different, more aggressive, closer. I could feel that something bad was going to happen, that he was not just going to follow me today, that he was going to do something. And I had nowhere to run. I had no one to call. It was when I saw that snack bar, and I thought that if I left a note, if someone saw it and called the police, maybe they would arrive in time. She wiped her face with trembling hands. I never imagined that someone would really do something, much less so fast, so effective. And that's exactly why, dear listeners, these stories need to be told. Leave in the comments what you think of what just happened. Have you ever been through something like this? Do you know someone who needed help in a silent way? Share your experiences, and let's create a support chain here. Dante stopped in front of Helena's building, a modest building in a middle-class neighborhood. He turned off the engine and turned to her, his expression serious but gentle. "You will need to change some habits in the next few days," he said, his voice taking a more practical tone. "Not because you are still in danger from him specifically, but because traumas like this mess with our minds. You will catch yourself looking over your shoulder, jumping at sudden noises, having trouble sleeping. This is normal. It is your mind processing months of terror. Consider looking for professional help, someone who can help you work through this." Helena listened, absorbing each word as if they were survival instructions, because in a way, they were. "And as for him?" she asked, her voice still insecure. "What will happen to him in your property?" Dante chose his words carefully. "He will spend a few days there, in an isolated place, where he will have a lot of time to reflect. My men will not physically hurt him seriously, but he will understand the fear he caused in you. He will experience a fraction of the terror you felt. And when he leaves there, if he has to leave the city after that, he will carry with him the absolute certainty that if he touches you again, if he even looks in your direction, the consequences will be much worse." He maintained eye contact, ensuring that she understood the seriousness of his words. "And I will personally ensure that you have my number. If he or anyone else tries something like this again, you call me. No matter the time, no matter the day." Helena felt a wave of emotion so strong that she had to cover her face with her hands. For the first time in 3 months, she felt something beyond fear, something beyond constant despair. She felt hope. She felt that maybe, just maybe, she could go back to living a normal life. She could walk on the street without feeling eyes on her back. She could sleep without waking up in a panic, thinking she had heard footsteps outside her window. "I don't know how to thank you," she said, her voice muffled by her hands. "You don't know me. You have no obligation to me. And yet—" Dante interrupted her kindly, placing a hand on her shoulder for a brief second, a paternal, protective gesture. "You don't have to thank me. You just have to move on, recover your life, and be happy again. That's all the gratitude I need." The days that followed were surreal for Helena. She woke up waiting to feel that knot in her stomach, that constant fear. But it didn't come. She went to work and didn't see that gloomy figure waiting on the corner. She checked her phone, and there were no threatening messages. It was strange, almost disconcerting, as if part of her had gotten so used to the fear that she didn't know how to function without it. But little by little, day after day, she began to truly relax. She began to smile without forcing it. She began to sleep all night without waking up in a panic. She began to live again, and it was amazing how she had forgotten how good it felt. 2 weeks later, she received a phone call from an unknown number. Her heart stopped for a second, that old fear trying to come back. But the voice on the other side was calm and reassuring. "I just wanted to update you," he said, his voice professional but with a hint of satisfaction. "Our friend was released after 10 days of intense reflection. He left the property, went straight to his house, took his things, and left the city. I have sources that told me that he moved to another state, far away from here. Before leaving, he wrote a letter of apology that my men guaranteed to be sincere, not just empty words. I can send it to you if you want to read it, but I would also understand perfectly if you don't want anything from him." Helena took a deep breath, processing the information. Part of her wanted to read the letter, wanted some kind of recognition of the hell he had put her through. But the other part, the wiser part, knew she didn't need it to move on. "You don't need to send it," she finally said, her voice firm. "I don't need his apologies to have peace. I already have peace now, thanks to you. He can keep his apologies and use them to be a better person from now on. That would be the best way for him to redeem himself, being better with other people, not sending me empty words." Dante smiled on the other side of the line, impressed by her strength. She had suffered so much, but she wasn't letting that define her. She wasn't clinging to victimization. She was choosing to move on, and that required a courage that many people didn't have. "One last thing," Dante added, his voice getting a little more serious. "I know you probably have questions about who I am, about how I was able to do what I did so quickly, about the kind of resources that I have. And I will be honest with you, Helena. I am someone who lives in a complicated world, who makes difficult decisions, and who doesn't always operate within the lines that society draws. But I want you to know that that night, when I saw your call for help, it wasn't the businessman who reacted. It wasn't the calculating strategist. It was the father. It was the brother. It was the human being who can't stand still when he sees injustice happening right in front of him. He paused, carefully choosing the next words. You owe me nothing. You don't have to feel obliged to do anything. I did that because it was the right thing to do. End of story. Helena felt her tears coming back, but they were different tears now. Tears of deep gratitude, of relief, of shared humanity. I still want to thank you, she insisted, even if you say you don't need to. I want you to know that you not only saved my life that night, you gave my life back. You gave back my ability to breathe without fear, to walk the streets without panic, to simply exist without that crushing weight. That's not a small thing. That's everything. She wiped her tears and smiled, even though she knew he couldn't see. And I'm going to pay it forward. I'm going to volunteer in a shelter for women in domestic violence situations. I'm going to use my experience to help other people who are going through what I went through. I'm going to turn this pain into something productive, something that makes a difference. Dante was silent for a moment, touched by her determination. How many victims he had seen over the years who were trapped in trauma, who let that define the rest of their lives. And here was Helena, someone who had every right to be bitter, to be angry with the world, and instead of that, she was choosing to use her pain to help others. You are stronger than you imagine, he said sincerely, and the world needs more people like you. If you need anything, any resource for this voluntary work, call me. I have connections that can help with financing, with training, with whatever is necessary. It would be an honor to support this type of initiative. They talked for a few more minutes, getting details right, exchanging more permanent contact info, and when they hung up, both felt that something significant had happened, something that went beyond a simple intervention on a dark night. Months passed, and Helena flourished in ways that she did not think possible. The voluntary work fulfilled a new purpose, a feeling that her pain had served for something greater. She helped dozens of women find the courage to get out of abusive situations, to free themselves from toxic relationships, to rebuild their lives from scratch. Every story she heard, every tear she wiped, every escape plan she helped to create, all this strengthened her even more. She was no longer that frightened woman at the restaurant writing a desperate request for help on a receipt. She was a survivor, a warrior, a beacon of hope for other people who were lost in the dark. As for Helena's pursuer, the news that arrived was that he had really changed his life. According to informants that Dante kept, the man had begun intensive therapy, had recognized his problems with control and obsession, and was genuinely trying to become a better person. He never tried to contact Helena again, neither directly nor indirectly. He had even begun to work in a support group for men with emotional control problems, sharing his story as a warning about how toxic behaviors can escalate. It was not a complete redemption. It did not erase what he had done, but it was a beginning, a recognition that he had caused real damage and a genuine attempt to ensure that he would never do that to anyone again. Dante and Helena maintained sporadic contact throughout the year. Sometimes it was just a text message, her telling him about a difficult case she had helped to solve, him offering resources or advice when appropriate. Other times, it was a quick coffee when their schedules coincided, conversations about life, about justice, about the delicate balance between doing what is right and doing what is legal. Helena never asked directly about Dante's business, and he never offered details, but there was a tacit understanding between them, a mutual respect that transcended simple judgments about right and wrong. She knew that he operated in gray areas, But she also knew that when it mattered, when an innocent person needed help, he was there without hesitation. A year after that fateful night, Helena organized a fundraising event for the shelter where she worked. It was an elegant night, with influential people from the city, businessmen, philanthropists, politicians. She was nervous. She had never organized something of this magnitude before, but she was determined to make it work. It was then that she saw Dante enter, wearing an impeccable suit, accompanied by a beautiful woman who she later discovered was his sister. He had come not only as a donor, but as a supporter, as someone who genuinely believed in the cause. When their eyes met across the hall, he nodded discreetly, and she felt that wave of familiar gratitude wash over her again. There was the man who had saved her life, who had returned her freedom, who had proved that there were still people willing to fight against injustice. During the event, Dante made a substantial donation, enough to keep the shelter operating for another year with surplus resources. He did not make a fuss, did not ask for public recognition. He only transferred the funds and continued to circulate through the party as if nothing had happened. But Helena knew, and when she had the chance to pull him to a quieter corner near the end of the night, she could not contain the emotion. "You did not have to do this," she said, her voice hoarse. "You have already done so much for me." Dante smiled, that rare smile he reserved for genuine moments. "I didn't do it for you this time," he said honestly. "I did it for the dozens of women you will help with these resources. I did it because investing in people like you, who turn pain into purpose, is the best investment there is. You took the worst moment of your life and turned it into a mission to help others. This deserves all the possible support." And before we say goodbye to this incredible story, do not forget to subscribe to the channel, press that bell, and leave a like. These stories need to be told. They need to be shared so that more people understand the importance of paying attention to the silent requests for help around us. And consider becoming a member of the channel for access to exclusive videos and benefits that will touch even deeper in your heart. That night, while Helena was driving home after the event, she thought about the incredible journey she had made. A year ago, she was writing a desperate request for help in a diner, without hope, without a way out, just trying to survive another day. And now, she was driving back from an event that she had organized herself that would help countless women, having transformed her trauma into strength, her fear into courage, her despair into hope. Life had a strange way of working, of putting the right people in the right place at the right time. If Dante hadn't been in that diner that night, if he hadn't seen the receipt, if he hadn't decided to act, who knows what would have happened to her. But he was there. He saw, he acted, and that made all the difference in the world. Helena learned that year that justice doesn't always follow the traditional paths, doesn't always follow the paths we expect. Sometimes, justice comes from a man in a dark suit, sitting in a humble diner, from someone who lives in a complicated world, but who maintains an unwavering moral code of protecting the defenseless. Sometimes, justice is fast, direct, and effective in ways that the conventional system could never be. And although Helena understood that Dante's world was full of complications and moral compromises, she also understood that when it mattered, when he was faced with a clear injustice, he chose the right side without hesitation. The pursuer, in turn, learned the most important lesson of his life in those 10 days at Moretti's property. He never spoke publicly about what happened there, but the changes in him were evident to anyone who knew him before. He had carried that sick obsession, that need for control, that feeling of entitlement over another person, and all that had been broken, fragmented, and reconstructed into something different. He learned to have empathy, to understand the fear he caused, to recognize that his actions had real and terrible consequences in the life of another person. It was a brutal education, but necessary, the kind of lesson that the judicial system rarely manages to teach. Helena's family also noticed the changes in her. Her mother commented on how she seemed lighter, how the smile had returned to her eyes. Her friends said she was more present, more engaged, more alive than she had been for months. And Helena knew it was because the weight had been taken off her shoulders, because she could finally breathe freely, because she was no longer spending all her energy just trying to survive the next day. She was living again, living for real, and it was an incredibly liberating feeling. She even started dating again, something she thought would be impossible after the trauma. But with therapy and time, she regained the confidence to open her heart. The volunteers at the shelter, where Helena worked frequently, asked about her story, about what had motivated her to join the cause with such passion. She shared the basics about having been stalked, about having found help when needed, but never went into specific details about Dante, or about how exactly her situation had been resolved. Some stories were too complex to be fully understood, and she did not want to risk complicating the life of someone who had done so much for her. Instead, she focused on conveying the most important message. Never give up, always look for help, always trust that there is a way out, even when everything seems hopeless. Dante, in turn, continued his life with the same duality that always existed in him. During the day, he was the cunning businessman, the political strategist, the man whose name carried weight in all the power circles of the city. During the night, he was the head of the Moretti family, someone who made difficult decisions, who protected his interests with an iron fist, who navigated a world where the line between legal and necessary was frequently blurred. But regardless of what role he was playing, he kept that internal code. That line he did not cross. He protected the weak when he could, punished the cruel when necessary, and tried, in his complicated way, to make the world a little better than he found it. The story of Helena and Dante became one of those stories whispered in certain circles, a reminder that sometimes justice comes from unexpected places, that sometimes the most improbable people become heroes at the right time. For Helena, it was a reminder that even in the darkest moments, when all hope seems lost, there is still the possibility of salvation. There is still someone who can see a silent request for help and decide to act. For Dante, it was a reminder of why he did what he did, of why, even living in a world of moral compromises and difficult decisions, he never lost sight of what really mattered: to protect the innocent and punish the guilty. 5 years after that night, Helena was already the director of the shelter, having expanded its services to include 3 different locations in the city. She had helped hundreds of women to rebuild their lives, had created professional training programs, had established partnerships with local companies to guarantee employment to survivors, and had developed a support system that went far beyond just providing a safe place to sleep. She transformed her trauma into a legacy of help and hope, and every day she remembered that diner, those 2 desperate words that changed everything. Help. She taught all the women who passed through the shelter about discreet ways to ask for help, about codes and signs that they could use when they were in danger, about never losing hope even when everything seemed impossible. And somewhere in the city, in a luxurious office at the top of a skyscraper, Dante Moretti sometimes looked out the window and thought about that night at the diner, about how a moment of attention, a simple act of reading a receipt that should have been thrown away, had changed the course of a life. He thought about all the other times he had seen silent requests for help, both before and after, and how every time he could do something, he did it, because in the end, regardless of how complicated his world was, how difficult his decisions were, he believed fundamentally in justice. And justice, true justice, did not wait for courts or trials when someone was in immediate danger. Justice acted, fast and decisive, and then dealt with the consequences. Life continued for both of them, each one following their own path, occasionally crossing at events or casual encounters, always with that silent recognition, that mutual respect that comes from having shared such an intense and transformative moment. Helena never forgot the feeling of absolute despair that led her to write that request for help, but she also never forgot the feeling of overwhelming relief when she realized that someone had seen, had understood, had acted. Dante never forgot the look on her face when he passed by her in the dark street, those tears of pure terror, and the satisfaction he felt to know that he had transformed that terror into security, that despair into hope. They were memories that defined them, that reminded both of the best of humanity, of the ability that we have to make a difference in the lives of other people when we choose to act instead of ignoring. And so the story ends, but its message remains echoing. Never ignore a request for help. Never underestimate the impact that a single act of kindness or courage can have in someone's life. And never lose faith that even in the darkest moments, there is the possibility of redemption, of justice, of a better ending than you could have imagined. Helena grabbed onto the hope in a receipt, and that desperate act found exactly the right person at the right time, someone who had the power and the will to do something about it. It was not a coincidence. It was destiny. It was not luck. It was justice. And in the end, it was exactly what she needed to claim her life back. If this story touched your heart, if you know someone who needs to hear about hope and justice, share this video. Subscribe to the channel for more stories that will move your soul. Leave a like to help us reach more people who need to know that it is never too late to ask for help, and that there is always someone willing to answer that request. And consider becoming a member of our channel to have access to exclusive content and be part of this community that believes in second chances and in true justice. Until the next story, and remember, always pay attention to the silent requests for help around you. You can be the Dante in someone's story,